CSS, Community Support Services. Is everybody in the room, are you guys familiar with CSS at all? No? Okay, so we provide, I'm going to step down before I fall, behavioral outpatient services to low-income individuals in Summit County. And those services range from mental health is our primary focus, primary care services, we do residential services, group homes, we have supportive employment. So we have a vast number of services that we're able to provide. And then if you want to go to the next. So you can see there, go ahead and go one more. So really our goal today is to be able to educate you guys on some best practices for when you're coming into contact with homeless individuals during your day, and then being able to feel comfortable with passing along resources to them and being able to help get them connected to us. So homeless outreach, we cover all of Summit County, and there's only 3 of us that cover the whole territory. So we're really focused in downtown Akron. We deal a lot with the encampments. So that can range anywhere from 5 people all the way up to some of our larger encampments are like 20 people. So we spend a lot of our time working with those, and then we also have a drop-in center, which we can get you guys the information from there as well. So really the goal is we kind of act as a bridge from the individuals that are outside and trying to get them to come into the outreach center. They can shower, they can do laundry there, and then we provide case management services. So helping individuals get IDs, helping them apply for food stamps, apply for disability, getting them connected to substance abuse treatment, mental health services. Those are just kind of the core things that we're working on. So engagement strategies, so as you guys are going about your day and you're coming across individuals, your first interaction with them is super important. And I don't know if you guys have certain policies or kind of some procedures for, typically if you find a homeless individual somewhere in the parks or in the city, they're probably going to be on a fine line of breaking some kind of rule. So really, or some kind of safety issue if they're in the park early in the morning, before hours, if they're drinking a beer. So really, what is your role as the city in trying to address kind of why they're there, but then also making sure that we're helping them get connected to resources as well too. So we always like to just keep it very friendly when you're meeting with someone, and you got to think that they're very vulnerable as it is, and they're in a situation where it's hard telling what their background is and why they're in the situation, why they're in the park to begin with. They may have a lot of trauma going on. They're not going to want to engage with you to begin with, so they're going to probably try to avoid you at all costs. So just you have a unique role in being able to make contact with them, because you're an employee and going about doing your job, you can come across contact with them very easily. So just being friendly with them, introducing yourself, your name, your role, maybe what it is you're doing, like, hey, I'm just passing through here, I haven't seen you before, and just trying to kind of get a little better understanding of their situation. So what I thought would be helpful is to run across a couple different scenarios that you guys may run into, and then be able to open that up to where if you guys have some questions as well, and we can kind of discuss situations that you run into and how we can handle that. So the first one is probably going to be a majority of your interactions, where you're going to identify that somebody is camping out somewhere, they're in a shelter. I know the recent one that we had made aware of as an individual was at behind Waterworks. The shelter is there, and he was hanging out in the morning. So say someone comes in the morning and they notice that an individual's there, maybe approaching them and introducing yourself. Hey, I'm John. I'm with Parks and Recreation. noticed that you're out here this morning, I haven't seen you before, is there anything that you need? And they'll probably kind of brush it off, no, I'm fine. I know that Peggy and Jason, you guys are gonna maybe try and get some backpacks. That's something that we could probably help with too, getting you guys some kits. It's always a great engagement tool to be able to have some water, some hygiene packs, just something to kind of provide with them. So hey, you know, I got some waters in the truck, I got a hygiene pack, is that something that you might need? You know, they're always very open to getting that kind of stuff. You know, yeah, sure, you know, grab that. Are you okay? Checking in with them and just trying to make sure, getting a little bit better understanding of why they're out there. And then making an introduction to the homeless outreach team. So we have some cards up here that you guys can take with you. And it can just be something as simple as, hey, you know, it's kind of how you go about making that connection. You don't want to come across as, hey, are you a homeless guy? Because that might be kind of offensive to them. If you go the route of community support services, sometimes there's some stigma associated with that. So we just like to play a very neutral, you know, we work with some guys on the homeless outreach team, passing the card, and then making sure that they know where it's at. So our outreach center is located in, are you guys all familiar with the transit? And where that's at in downtown Akron? So most of the guys, if you can get them to the transit center, we're a short walk from there. So being able to, and that's another engagement tool as well too, is making sure that, are you guys familiar where the transit's at? And then you may be able to kind of help them navigate that. You know, the transit's downtown Akron. Are you guys familiar with taking the buses? You know, yeah, you know, I'm familiar with taking the buses. I know that Peggy's gonna try and have access to some bus passes. So that's a way for you guys to be able to maybe provide them a bus pass and head on down and see those guys. You're probably gonna have more than one interaction. It's very unlikely that they're just gonna go ahead and pick up and head on down and see us and get some help and the problem solved. So you'll probably have numerous interactions with them, and as you're building that rapport with them, you know, hopefully they'll start to open up with you, because you guys are ultimately the ones that are gonna be coming across them every day. And, you know, over time, hopefully they'll start to open up to you more. I think the most challenging thing to identify is when someone is in crisis. And that looks different from everybody. For us, someone sleeping outside every night, that would be probably a crisis for most of us, and that wouldn't be a normal situation. So for individuals that are staying outside though, most of them are probably comfortable with that, and that's where they want to be. So if you're coming up into a situation where you identify somebody in a park, I know Jason had mentioned that one guy was drinking early in the park, being able to kind of assess that situation and see if, you know, the individual's drinking, and then it seems like maybe they've been drinking all night, they've been drinking all morning, they seem really intoxicated, they're agitated, their behavior seems kind of aggressive. If you guys are kind of starting to pick up on some of that stuff, I don't know, Jason, if you guys have what your access is to being able to pull somebody else in that situation. If you guys would direct the police to get involved in that situation, or just trying to de-escalate it and say, hey, you know, policies per the park are, you know, you're not allowed drinking on property. You know, if you guys can kind of gather your things and, you know, make your way out and try and de-escalate it and get them out of the park before you have to go and call the police. Because ultimately, they're going to do the same thing. They're just going to remove them from the park, and then they're going to end up wandering into the city or some other place and end up being another problem from somebody else. But if you see that it's a situation where the individual may have some really bizarre behavior, they seem like they're maybe really manic, they're talking 100 miles per hour, they seem really disorganized, they're not making any sense when they're talking to you, maybe they seem really paranoid, their behavior warrants whether or not they would want to maybe potentially harm somebody else or harm you, then those are kind of some red flags of we need to pull in somebody that's going to be able to kind of help with this situation. So I don't know, Jason, if you guys are kind of developing a protocol for it when you come into contact with that, what you guys would go through, and then notifying the appropriate people to be able to get out there. I mean, we're happy to come out in those situations. It's more of a time issue for us. So when you come into contact with someone, I mean, that stuff happens pretty quick, and we don't have the ability to be able to get out there right away. But if you guys are coming into contact with people, you're more than welcome to, if it's one of those situations where you're noticing that someone's continually out there, or you're like, man, I don't know what to do in this situation, you're more than welcome to call us, and we can kind of talk it through over the phone, and if we feel like it warrants us having to come out, we'd be happy to come out and meet with you guys, or even scheduling with those guys, if you can get them to commit to something on the phone, hey, I'm gonna call Michael down at the outreach center, maybe we can set something up, and being able to have a time where we'll come out and meet them at the library, we can meet them where they're at in the morning sometime. So those are kind of the three basic scenarios. I guess the do's and the don'ts, if you're pushing them out of the park and you're coming across to them and telling them they have to leave and you're very standoffish, it's just gonna push them away more and cause more problems probably in the end, because then they're not gonna wanna get any help, they're not gonna wanna leave the park, they're gonna end up causing problems, leaving trash. So it's tough because a lot of them can be very difficult to deal with, but just being able to be open with them and trying to help connect them to the appropriate resources. I know that was kind of a lot in a little bit of time, so I don't know if you guys have some more specific scenarios or questions about like our outreach center and stuff that we do and what that may look like. That went a lot faster than I thought. I don't know if I was talking faster than I thought.
So I just kind of want to throw out there from the supervisor standpoint, if anyone here, if any of our staff's uncomfortable engaging with someone, I want to make sure that they know that we're not telling anyone to engage. I would say call either myself or Matt or Jason to engage that situation rather than them doing it on their own.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And we would even be comfortable with doing some walk-alongs with you guys too. So say, you guys have, maybe we could plan once a month or something and just hit up kind of the hotspot areas with you guys and just kind of get comfortable with what that looks like. Because it is a very awkward situation to have to approach somebody and kind of ask those questions. So, and then once you kind of get a feel for just approaching them and what that looks like, I would be happy with doing that with you guys. And I think the biggest thing is it's hard for us to, when you guys see somebody, by the time the information gets relayed to us, it's already gone and over with. So we're trying to be able to have you guys kind of do a soft introduction to them and maybe kind of get a warm handoff and build that bridge between them. Is that something you guys would be interested in doing? Doing like some walk around with you guys like our early morning? We could pick like different crews.
We could. I don't know that we have a lot of issues at this point. A lot of people in the parks. I know Riverfront's kind of been one of those that we've had some on and off. But yeah, I'd be open.
Yeah.
There's probably about half a dozen homeless people. When I did the count, I found several at the library. We went along the river.
Yeah.
We found that gentleman that was in the tent under the bridge. There are Bailey's.
And that would be, if you guys have spots where you know that people are at and are able to, we'd be happy to go along with you guys. So it's just, we seem to, whenever we come out, we just seem to miss them, so I don't know if they're not there, so there's a disconnect from that, but, and it can even be, you know, just as simple as handing off a card to them. And, you know, if you see a guy underneath the pavilion somewhere or underneath a bridge, you know, in passing, hand them a card, leave it on the table. Just even making sure they're okay too is a good conversation. Hey, I just want to make sure you're cool. And it can be very simple as that, or just, hey, you know, my name's John, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Okay, just want to make sure and, you know, and pass through. We're not expecting a lot of engagement to where, you know, you're providing interventions and doing assessments with them and all that stuff. But just kind of building that rapport, seeing where they're at, and trying to make a connection with them.
Half the time, most of our homeless guys are just there. The snare they don't want is with law enforcement, you know what I mean? So usually if they're not a cop, they're automatically a little more cool with you, you know what I mean? And they just want the interaction to end. So sometimes if it's just like a real brief, casual conversation, it goes a long way in them being willing to work with us later. Because we do the same thing you guys do. It's like playing whack-a-mole. If you throw someone out of, you know, downtown, they're gonna be in the park, they're gonna be on Billy Road Bridge, and they just kind of bounce around. So if we can get them early, we got a better chance of trying to get them into housing, and you won't have to deal with the same person we still over. We're big on the safety front. If someone's being obviously aggressive or is either psychotic or the meth right now is particularly bad, you know, don't hesitate to call law enforcement. You know, especially if it's psychiatric in nature and it's really bad. Sometimes that nudge from the judge can help them, force them to get into treatment and get some help. That can work on our end. The other scenario we sometimes get, as far as where we would involve law enforcement, if someone's a danger to themselves or others, if they're really aggressive and threatening, or if you think they're so out of it they can't take care of themselves. Mike went out a while ago and there was a woman, it was like when it was like under 10 degrees a couple months ago, and they were going out after hours and going to a bunch of camps. This woman's like, you know, on the concrete with like a sheet basically, shivering at 6 o'clock in the evening, you know what I mean? And they saw probably 20 people that night, but they only called the cops on this one and the EMTs who want to get her assessed, and she did get hospitalized. So, and she's now engaged in, you know, in treatment and doing a lot better. But those kind of situations we usually don't mess around. You guys have CIT officers too, right? If you do come across someone you think it's like a major mental health issue, request a CIT officer if you can. They're just better trained and interact with really, really sick clients better than your average officer does. So that goes a long way. I know you guys didn't used to have those, and it's made a big difference in, you know, the quality of interactions and how it goes.
Has anybody here actually interacted with a homeless person while at work? I'm not sure how that went.
I just backed off and called Brian.
Sure.
And, you know, I work a lot with the churches, homeless, and, one thing we're taught there also now is never engage alone.
Sure.
You know, because then if they are hostile, you get into a competition of your word against theirs. And so we're, even at the church, if you're talking back off, have somebody with you or pass off.
Sure.
And we do the same. We don't outreach by ourselves.
Yeah.
That's why I always call you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for a while, they were coming into the NAT in the morning, sometimes in the winter. Do they still do that?
No, it's been probably at least a year
Okay.
or more since we've had anyone in there.
Where were they staying at? Once like Bailey Bridge was always like sporadic hotspot.
It would be like right inside the front door. We used to have chairs at the front door, so they would just kind of come in and sit there, and then they would fall asleep.
Okay.
Or they would be right outside the front door, off to the sides, like sitting on the ground.
Okay.
Are you asking where they originated?
Where they're sleeping, are they sleeping in parks, or are they like
Parks,
garages and just materialize?
There's a couple restaurants where they'll sleep behind dumpsters.
Okay.
Parking garage is another. So there's several places that have been reported and that we've actually come across. The one gentleman that we helped, the young man that actually has a job in a apartment and everything now, the one that had diabetes. Remember when I made the mistake of taking donuts and coffee out, thinking that, probably like to have hot coffee and donuts on the floor.
Runs into the one fragile
The
diabetic.
one guy, he was a diabetic, and so he kept coming to my office, and I would give him protein drinks and beef jerky and stuff, and it actually helped him because his blood sugar would spike and dip, and he would get a little nuts when, when his blood sugar was off the charts. So, but he finally went downtown. We provided him with a couple bus passes and the card, and finally went downtown and he sought help, and now he's doing great. So, but he actually, we thought he was under the Bailey Road Bridge, but it turns out he was actually at Waterworks Park, and he would, in the early morning hours, walk from Waterworks, under the bridge and then up to Acme. So, sometimes it's hard to figure out where they're actually coming from. And they get up, they pack their camp up, and they leave early in the morning. So, they go hang out in the grocery stores or at the Net or at the library. Well, a library's closed right now, but they used to, be there a lot.
Now that the weather is starting to get nice and some of the restrictions are starting to lift, I think that we'll probably start seeing an uptick again in the activity.
Right. I think one of the hardest things for our homeless people that are here in the falls is getting them downtown. One of the things I wanted to say is never give a ride. Don't ever take anyone in your car downtown. If you need to, refer them to me, and I'll make sure that they get a bus pass so that they can get downtown. And I'll let them know where the bus line is so that they can get there.
Is there something that could be set up, at least for myself, where we could possibly do that?
Sure.
Run into a situation, maybe set up a couple on hand.
Sure, absolutely. I'll make sure that you have them. So,
We're like a block and a half from the transit center, so if they can get on the bus, like every city bus eventually ends up at the transit center anyway, so.
Right.
If they're going the wrong direction, it'll take longer to go. Any questions? We don't want to just be talking heads and yammer about stuff you guys don't care about. You had any other, like, specific situations that you were curious about, or? I know this is early.
Yes, so I was a little nervous the first time Peggy and I did a walkthrough. I think it was with CSS, and we met two homeless guys, both at Riverfront Park. One was under the bridge, and one had a tent right near the highway. And the one guy was real talkative, the other guy was real skittish, but it was a little, I mean, I'm a talkative guy, I'm friendly, but I was a little nervous talking to them, but they're normal people just like us. And the one guy, they both said they want resources, but, yeah, if you come across them, just be cautious, and it's nice to go in groups like we said, but just kind of engage them and don't be confrontational. It's nice we can have the cards and we'll work on getting resources like bus passes and maybe some water. I'll see if we can do that with Sarah, but we'll come across homeless people, so just be cautious and kind, and whatever you're comfortable with too. Like Brian said, if you're not comfortable, just call him or Matt or I, and we can help out.
Also, one of the things that I noticed when the four of us were out and engaging people, you guys were always requesting of the homeless person, is it okay if I approach you? Is it okay if I come over and talk to you? Getting their permission, not just walking up on them. So if you're gonna engage, just be respectful. of
Because
their
like, even if
space.
it's an alley, it's like their home, you know what I mean? I wouldn't, barge up into your living room, so we try to be,
Right.
Respectful about that. I don't go into tents typically or anything like that. Even if I know damn well someone's probably sitting in there and ignoring me,
Yeah.
I'll just announce myself. and
Well, and that
leave
also,
something outside the door.
it gives you an opportunity to assess the situation a little bit more too, because if you are engaging them from a distance, you can watch their behavior, whether that it's safe to approach them or not.
I would say, out of the 5 years that I've been doing this, I don't think I've ever encountered like a situation where I felt like I got into a dangerous situation with somebody. So most of the time, it's, and if it was one where you could see it coming pretty far away and you just didn't even get involved into it. So I mean, most of the time, it's just checking in with them, hey, I just wanna make sure you're all right. You need a water. The water is a big one, especially with the summertime coming. Here's a water. You'd be surprised. I mean, that might have been, they might not have access to water in, a day or something. So, and they are in a bad situation in their life where, they don't know how to go figure it out right now. They could be struggling with, you know, an alcohol addiction, they could have gotten through a divorce, kicked out of their house. They're out here just trying to figure it out, so, I know that it doesn't seem like you guys have you're right there with them, when you're going about your day, and it can impact them in such a positive way, just to even be like, hey man, you know, just even a hi and checking in on them could be huge for those guys, because someone's actually taking the time to stop and make sure they're all right. So it's just kind of changing that perspective of you can impact it in a positive way is a big thing.
How do you respond to people that call and report people that are homeless to you? Do you guys get that a lot? As I struggle with that, people will, I'll get an email or a phone call from someone who says, you know, I was out in the backyard with my daughter, backs up to the park, there was a homeless man, I don't want my child out there. You know, I don't know whether he's okay to be around. I mean, what do you guys normally?
We don't get those from the public as much.
No.
We typically take approaches like, how can we help this person get indoors
Right.
and get what they need, not that, you know,
Right.
the boogeyman homeless person's gonna kidnap your child kind of situation.
Right.
We don't get as much of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, ours are more directly coming from the city of Akron, and, you know, dealing with large encampments of, you know, we have a couple right now, over 20 people, right in the middle of Akron, so that's kind of our biggest calls that we're dealing with right now.
A lot of times they're on tracks, so what happens, someone will be, you know, we've had big camps in the past, someone will be drunk or an idiot or whatever and do something, so either someone gets hit by the train or someone causes the train to stop and it turns into a big scenario, and next thing you know, the CXS police come through and run everybody out of town, so, we get those kind of calls sometimes, you know, we don't have any control over that, but we try to get out there early if we can and just let them know it's coming and try to offer housing assistance if we can. Sometimes it works, I mean, I don't like seeing people get thrown out, but, I don't know, people don't make change because things are going great, you know, sometimes if they've had to move 2 or 3 times, they just get sick of it, and they finally, after the 20th time of Mike asking them to work on housing, they, you know, become willing to do it, and we can get our hooks in them, so we're persistent stalkers about that. But the contact makes a big difference. I've never, ever, ever walked up on someone in the woods and like, oh, great, thank God someone helped me with my, you know, severe persistent mental health issues and my addiction problems. That never, ever, ever happens, you know. It's usually like, you know, I use a pair of socks or some hygiene stuff or something like that. Eventually we build up till they trust us enough to try to work on the bigger stuff.
And two, if you guys know spots where like people are habitating, like I know the underneath the bridge is a popular spot too. If you guys wanna leave cars, post signs, as just kind of reinforcement. If you see a guy that's continually in a shelter every morning, you know, I always just leave like a card at the table that he always sits at, so that way, you know, he comes there in the morning, he sees it, just little things like that. And my contact information is on there as well too. There's 3 of us, myself, Stephanie, and Alexis. So if you guys come into a situation you're not sure, you're more than welcome to call us, and we can kind of try and figure it out. If you feel like we need to come out here, we can plan something as well.
That'd be great, thanks.
Cool.
Cool. Any other questions before we go? Great, thanks guys.
Awesome, thank you.
Appreciate it.